Baby Fahodier. This is Gullah Jack. I'm here with our technical advisor, brothers Macaru, historian, brother, technical advisor. Of course, we have brother Amos. This is African Liberation Media, sounding the war horn. Moken, taken from Dr. Baruti. So much to do, so little time. Of course, we're not going to belabor any particular point. Brother Amos, you have a special guest. Introduce your special guest to the audience, please, sir.
And Baby Fahodier, brothers and sisters and listeners, today we're taking a look into the situation that is happening or has been happening on the continent in Ghana, where our dear brother, Ọbádélé Kambon, who is the professor at Ghana, who is a PhD in linguistics. He teaches several African languages, Twi, Yoruba, Kiswahili, Wolof. He also teaches capoeira and leadership survival skills, outdoor leadership survival skills, who is spearheaded the Gandhi Must Fall campaign or movement that caused the statue of Gandhi to be taken down at Ghana University. So we're very honored to have him with us today to give us a breakdown on the situation that is currently happening in Ghana and what has already transpired. Dr. Kambon, how are you doing?
I'm blacknificent, blacktastic, black powerful, and blackorific.
Ashe. So a lot of our listeners saw what happened at Ghana University, where the statue was taken down via social media and via different media outlets. But if you could give us just a history before we get into how the statue came down, give us a history of who Gandhi was, who he really was, as far as his beliefs on Africans and on the African continent. Help us understand why it was important for this statue to be removed.
Okay. All right. So in terms of Gandhi, he was born into a Vaishya caste. You know, there's what's called Varna Srama Dharma, which is the 4-tier caste system. It has Brahmins at the top, Kshatriyas underneath that, Vaishyas, which is what Gandhi was, and then Shudras at the bottom. Now, in terms of that, now you have multiple uncountable subcastes for each one. And Gandhi was part of the subcaste of Vaishya called Baniyas, who are mainly traders. So, you know, he was born into that caste system. And then in his early 20s, he moved to South Africa, where from the very beginning, you know, you see him expressing his views about who he referred to as Kafirs, you know, meaning black people. There was supposedly this incident on the Pietermaritzburg train, which first off, that doesn't even appear until 16 years after it supposedly happened. And there's a good book by G.B. Singh and Tim Watson called Gandhi Under Cross-Examination, where basically the whole book is written as though, all right, if Gandhi was on the witness stand, he gives 4 different accounts of how that whole incident happened, and not one single one is consistent with the next one. So, you know, he has the account in 1909 where he says he was administered a brutal blow to the face. In the 1925 account, he says he exchanged the brutal blows for being boxed in the ears. So just, you know, and I won't go so far into it, but basically there's a very high likelihood that that thing never even happened. But anyway, you know, from the time that he set foot in Africa, he's always talking about the Kafirs. He's talking about how, like 1894, he had the Indian opinion newspaper where he laments about the Indian location being chosen for dumping down all Kafirs of the town. And Kafir is an extremely pejorative term, which he was aware of because he always put that on par with the term coolie. He's always lamenting about, oh, these people are calling us coolies. They must stop. They're calling us coolie lawyers and coolie doctors, and our women coolie Marys. So he's very clear that that term applied to the Indians is quite pejorative, but he doesn't extend that same thing to that same courtesy to the black people, which he never refers to by their own name. He always refers to them as Kaffirs. In 1893, not too long after he got there, he says, I venture to point out that both the English and the Indians sprang from a common stock called the Indo-Aryan. A general belief seems to prevail in the colony that Indians are little better, if at all, than savages or natives of Africa. So there's been this back and forth, like, okay, maybe Kaffir didn't mean such a bad thing. But then when you compound it with the fact that he's always referring to natives of Africa as savages, half heathen, 1 degree removed from an animal, live almost like animals, it becomes very clear that he didn't mean Kaffir as a term of endearment. It's just that every single thing that he says about the indigenous black people, he says dragged down to the position of a raw Kaffir. That is very clear that he doesn't, again, mean this as a term of endearment. And then further to his, worldview, you see in 1895, he's talking about a correspondence that was carried on in order to ensure that separate entrances will be provided for the Asiatics, so they don't have to go through the same entrance as the natives, so they're not degraded to the level of a raw Kaffir. So you see this, early on, and this is what the Gandhi apologists do. They say, oh, well, that was only, early on in his life that he, changed later on. So what I did, I actually posted an article. I was commissioned actually to write an article for The Print, which is an Indian periodical that appears online, because all of them are like, oh, it's just early on in his life. And matter of fact, someone who's considered to be the foremost authority on Gandhi in India, Ram Guha, put out this, basically a pack of lies, saying that, oh, it was only in his youth that he was, whatever, and later on he changed and, blah, blah, blah. And he said something that was just an outright lie. He said by his mid-30s, Gandhi had transformed and was no longer, saying all these racist things. So what I did is, I put forth the counter evidence. So Gandhi was born on 1869, October 2nd, 1869. And he supposedly, according to his autobiography, he had an epiphany in 1906. So what I did is I said, well, let's just restrict all the racist stuff that he's talking about and his deeds to after 1906 and see how it measures up. So in 1907, or actually later after that vow in 1906, he talks about the board leaders should not consider Indians on being the same level as Kaffirs. So this is, he was born in 1869, so by 1906, he's a good 3 years short of being 40, right? So this is his mid-30s. So if you're saying by his mid-30s he transformed, well, now we have counter evidence already. It talks about there's a sharp distinction that exists between British Indians and Kaffir races in South Africa. He's saying if registration is made compulsory, there'll be no difference between Indians and Kaffirs. And then he talks about, again, he laments about the Indian of the Transvaal being indiscriminately dubbed a coolie. One even hears in official circles such expressions as coolie lawyer, coolie doctor, coolie merchant. His women are coolie Marys. Then he goes on to say that the Indian is denied the privilege of riding in the same railway carriages as his white fellow colonists. So fellow colonists, it means he's a partner in the colonization alongside the Indo-Aryan whites. He says his children are afforded no facilities for education except that they attend schools set apart for Kaffirs. And, again, this is part of the double standard. So this is when he is 38 years old. He's talking about reduction of British Indians to the status of a Kaffir. This is on 12 December 1907. He says the Kaffirs are, as a rule, uncivilized. They live almost like animals. Imagine the plight of a poor Indian thrown into such company. He talks about the British rulers take us to be so lowly and ignorant that they assume, like the Kafirs who can be pleased with toys and pins, that we can also be fobbed off with trinkets.
Let me,
So this is
Dr. Kambon, let me,
yeah.
just for the historical context of our audience, this is taking place during the period of time when the Dutch Europeans are in the process of solidifying the apartheid state of South Africa. So this is the historical context where this is taking place in the late 19th century, early 20th century. I just wanted to make sure our listeners understood the context of where this is taking place in apartheid South Africa during that particular time.
So really quick, this is before, as a policy, apartheid was even, an official term. And this is what we're looking at is the role of Gandhi in really instituting what would later be called apartheid. And what he's doing is he's transferring the caste-like system, a multi-tiered, multi-level caste-like system onto South Africa, where you have, like in India, you have Brahmins on top, then Kshatriyas, then Vaishyas, and then Shudras. So, at that point in time, it was just whites get their own thing, and then everybody else gets their own thing. What Gandhi's role is giving that nuanced, multi-layered caste-like system where you have, the British here, the Dutch, and, any whites, they go through their thing. But then he wants a separate thing for what are called Asiatics, the Indians. And then underneath that are the indigenous people, which he refers to as Kafirs. Now, the other point I want to bring up is when we talk about South Africa, it's usually in terms of, is this apartheid or post-apartheid? Everything is discussed in relation to apartheid. Hold on one second. All right, so everything is discussed in terms of apartheid, and this is fundamentally wrong. And I'm actually writing an article that goes into integration, apartheid, and untouchability as basically intentional misdiagnoses and diversions from the ultimate problem and therefore the ultimate solution. So in South Africa, they say apartheid is the problem, which is to say that you're apart from the whites. So if you take that to be the problem, then the resolution is just to get closer to the whites. That's not the problem. The problem is genocide. So if you look even at something like the UN definition of genocide, killing members of the group, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group, instituting conditions to bring about destruction in whole or in part of the group, preventing births within the group, and then transferring children from the group to another group. Those are the 5 conditions from the definition, the UN definition of genocide, right? So basically in the article, we look at in South Africa, all 5 of those conditions are met for genocide. So therefore, how can the solution to genocide be to get rid of quote unquote apartheid? So now you can be closer to the ones who are committing genocide. You're no longer apart from them. That's insane. Same thing in the US. The problem is that we're not integrated. So all 5 conditions for genocide are met. However, the solution that we have, pawned off on us is just to integrate with the ones who are committing genocide. That can never be a logical or intelligent solution to genocide. And then the same thing in India, where they say the problem is untouchability, that we don't let you touch us. This is a white Indo-Aryan speaking. So if we allow you to come into the temples and draw water from the well, that means shut up, your problems are resolved. And again, the Dalits, the Adivasis, the scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, so-called, that all of them are subjected to genocide. So therefore, the resolution to that problem can never be just to get closer to the ones who are perpetrating and perpetuating that genocide. And what you find in all 3 places is that our white enemies select heroes for us. So in South Africa, who's the face of anti-apartheid is Mandela. In the US, who's the face of, integration, that's Martin Luther King. And then in India, who's the face of, getting rid of untouchability is Gandhi. And this is essentially what happens when our pale white Eurasian enemies select our heroes for us, then we get that. But if we select our heroes for ourselves, then it may be someone like Mangaliso Sobukwe, who people don't really even know about to the extent that they know about someone like a Mandela. And, North America, you could look at somebody like a Marcus Garvey or a Nat Turner or Nana Denmark VC. I hear the name Gullah Jack, so that's near and dear to my heart. But those aren't the heroes that we're given by our white enemies for obvious reasons. If you look at India, it could be somebody like Dr. Ambedkar or, Gangu, who was a Dalit who rose up and, destroyed their pale white Indo-Aryan enemies, who are invading. Now, how many people even know who Gangu is or Dr. Ambedkar? We don't get those names. What we get is Gandhi shoved down our throats. So I just wanted to put that in context as well. So now to come back to the South Africa case, again, some of the most vicious stuff that Gandhi said was after his so-called epiphany, where he's talking about, being lowered down to the level of a Kafir, class with the Kafir. Those Kafirs are like animals. They're 1 degree removed from an animal. Now, picture 360 degrees on a circle. So if I am at 360 degrees and I go to 359, this means you can't even notice where I made that change. And this is when he's 39, where he's saying that there's an urgent need for separate lavatories for Indians, that Indian prisoners should never be lodged with Kafirs. And that's his role in segregating the Indians in the jails. He's talking about all the stuff that they have to deal with, eat food, which is hardly food, starve ourselves, suffer being kicked, and live among Kafirs. It's better to die than to suffer this.
And Dr. Kambon,
yes.
this word Kafirs, this word is similar to the N word. Oh, how okay, all right. Just wanted to make sure that listeners understand this term that Gandhi is using is similar to the term that white Europeans call us here in the United States and all over the world. Go ahead, brother.
Right. And then you can look on the 19th of July, 1909. Again, you see that Gandhi is very sensitive to this because he talks about we were locked up with the Kafirs. There was not a single European officer who described us as Indians. We were called Sammis or Coolies. So he's very clear that, all right, Sammy and Coolie is pejorative for Indians, but he has a problem with that one, but he doesn't have a problem with the one that's pejorative for the indigenous black people, and he uses it, frivolously left, right, front, and center, that these are the Kafirs, but don't call me Coolie. You people are Kafirs, but you dare not call me a Coolie, right? So again, this is a double standard, which is really typical for Gandhi throughout his life. So, again, Guha, this supposed preeminent Gandhi scholar, is lying outright, which is typical Gandhi fashion. This is how you can tell this is somebody who's a follower of Gandhi, because he's just lying straight to our face when we have evidence that goes to the contrary and really insulting the intelligence of all black people. So Gandhi, people, his daughter, Ella Gandhi, whoever, all these descendants of Gandhi are like, oh, he was 23, 24 when he got to South Africa, but then they want to act like he is in a cryogenic freeze chamber and that he stayed 23 throughout the entire time. He's 40 years old when he's saying this. On 8th of October, 1909, for those who can do arithmetic like myself and others, he's saying we do not get the food that we're used to and are classified with the Kafirs. This is 40 years old. Was he 23 when he was 40? Maybe my math is off. And he only lived to 78, so this is past middle age. So you can't say he's young, because me, I'm 39. He was older than me. So if I go out and I start calling, someone white a cave beast, a Neanderthal, or whatever, a cracker or whatever, you can't say, all right, well, I'm 23 when I'm 40, so I don't know what I'm saying. I'm very clear on what I'm saying. You understand? He's saying in 1910, at the age of 41, some Indians do have contacts with Kafir women. I think such contacts are fraught with greatest danger. Indians would do well to avoid them altogether. If the regulations provide for Kafir police, we can fight the regulations. I saw, and this is 1913, right before he's leaving South Africa, he says, I saw it reported that we might even ask the Kafirs to strike, but such is not our intention at all. So from the day he gets there all the way up to right before he's about to leave, he's very clear. I'm going to use this pejorative term. I'm going to refer to them as Kafirs. I'm going to deprive them of their rights. So here you have the whites who are trying to institute a police force of indigenous native black people. He's saying if there are regulations that provide for a Kafir police, he as an Indo-Aryan Indian is going to fight those regulations and deprive them of the rights that even his fellow colonists are trying to give to the black people. He's going to fight tooth and nail against those regulations. And beyond that, he fought in the Bambata Rebellion. That was again in 1906. He was agitating to get guns, military training, but then later on he lied about it and said that his heart was with the Zulus. He bore no grudge against the Zulus, blah, blah, blah. He wanted to join the medical corps. But when you read what he was writing at the time, that's not what he was saying at all. He said that he wants military training. There's a Firearms Act that will allow Indians to take their share in the defense of the colony. So those who, you can tell, those who read the autobiography, because they don't know that Gandhi is a straight up liar, right? They think, oh, well, he changed. You can only think that if you haven't read what he was writing at the time. Because if you read what he was writing at the time, and then you say your heart was with the Zulus. Well, I read what you wrote in 1906 at the time, and you are saying let's get guns, let's get firearms to shoot these Kafirs. That's what you're talking about. And even the black people who he duped, such as Mandela, who isn't a personal hero of mine, or Martin Luther King, who was also not a personal hero of mine, but take them for whatever they were. That those who even like a Mandela was like, oh, you have to forgive him for what he said in his youth, not knowing that that's not his youth at all. But even beyond that, there's absolutely no recognition that, hold on, stop. Gandhi was lying. When he said his role in the Bambata Rebellion, that's a straight up lie. So even if you want to, quote unquote, forgive him and turn the other cheek for what he's saying and what he's doing. And the other thing is people, the Indo-Aryans who are in India now and all these white folks, they think, or at least are articulating that racism is saying mean things, right? Without taking into account the systemic nature of it and how is primarily the core of it is the actions. So when you see him fighting in wars against the Zulus, when we're talking about racism, this is more of what we're dealing with, not just that he's saying mean things and then later on in life, when he became an old man, he stopped saying quote unquote mean things. That's what we have to focus on. You have to focus on the actions of what he's doing at the Durban Post Office and Durban Telegraph Office. You have to look at the actions later on and how he is depriving the Dalits of the double vote, how he's depriving them of separate electorates and coercing them under threat of essentially what would be a program where they would be massacred with this fast unto the death. And people, what I've seen in a lot of the scholarship on Gandhi, it tends to look at either just when he was in South Africa and then that's it, or just looking at his role in oppressing the Dalits later in life and then that's it. But you usually don't see those who bridge the gap, that Gandhi was pro-Indo-Aryan throughout his entire life. He was anti-black throughout his entire life. When he was in South Africa, he was against the black people there. When he went to India, he was against the black people there. And that is the string that ties together his earlier and later life.
We'll talk about the plan by the Indian government to erect these statues around the world. How did the statue even get erected in Ghana? Because we know that Gandhi had no connection with Ghana at all. There are plenty of African heroes and sheroes that we can erect to pay homage to. Why did the university or the government choose to erect the statue in the first place?
So this is a good question. I'll give you a little bit of I'll say something of a timeline. So on the 27th of May 2016, that's where the first announcement of an address by President Pranab Mukherjee was emailed to the faculty at the University of Ghana. And at that point in time, there was absolutely no mention of a Gandhi statue along with that. And then on the 1st of June 2016, there was a second announcement of the address to the faculty, again without any mention of a Gandhi statue. Then on June 12th, there was notice of an address by Pranab Mukherjee posted to the UG website. And then on the 13th of June 2016, there was a final reminder. Again, no mention of the Gandhi statue. Now, on the 13th of June, that's where the statue was unveiled prior to the President Mukherjee's address without any consultation or prior notice to the UG community. On the 4th of July 2016, upon driving past the statue, that's where I saw the statue. I took photos of it, and I sent an email with 52 of Gandhi's more pro-Indo-Aryan anti-black quotes from ranging from 1894 up till 1911. But again, you have some going all the way to 1913 and more. So this incited shock, and it sparked a running email debate among faculty. And it was really a one-sided debate because those who were, Gandhi apologists, they don't have any information. And this is the only way that you can really be for Gandhi is you have to be either vastly ignorant or you have to be against black people intentionally. Those are the only two options. And it tended to be the former more than the latter, even though a little bit of the latter was in there as well. So we started a petition, Gandhi Must Fall on petition, started on change.org. And that was really due to our connections with civil society. So it wasn't just me. I started the discussion on campus. But in terms of off campus, there was another brother, Manchi Aikwe, who hosts Chale Wate Festival, which is the largest festival in West Africa. Other colleagues, Professor Adamako Ampofo, who was on sabbatical in California at the time, but she's got into the whole debate and actually penned the draft of the petition with some input, but mainly her. She drafted what ended up being the petition that went online. Dr. Kwajoa Pia, who's in law, and then, other faculties such as history, Okosia Pebi, Professor Okosia Pebi, and then others. So, that was the petition, and we ended up with about 100 signatures per day up until the government said that they're going to take down the statue. We delivered the letter on the 21st of September with over 1,500 signatures gathered within the 2 weeks with the registrar. Now, on the 22nd, you have these Quislings who started a counter petition, and they got 230 signatures, including ghost signatures. What do I mean by ghost signatures? Their very first signatory was Mahatma Gandhi. So this tells you something about their character. This tells you something about their character, and then also, people never even heard, about them. Now, later on, they wanted to try to ride the wave and try to get us to give them some of the limelight, which we declined. So they were like, "Oh, let's come out and debate it." Now, it would have been a win-win situation either way. So this was like very late into the game, but essentially because they couldn't get any publicity for their sellout campaign, they wanted to kind of ride our backs so that people even know that they exist. So we had two options. One, we could meet them in debate and just thoroughly crush them, which would have been a win, or we can ignore them and now no one even knows that they exist. And to this day, most people don't even know that there was anything called a Gandhi Must Stand whatsoever. And, we're like, why are we going to help you and you're a sellout? That doesn't make any sense. So we, just kind of let them go to the wayside. There was a letter to the University Council from the Gandhi Must Fall petitioners acknowledging receipt of the petition. The statue was defaced and the spectacles were stolen on the 2nd of October or sometime thereabout. And then on the 4th of October, we gave a public seminar on Black Lives Matter and Decolonizing the Academy, where essentially for my presentation, I went into how we know about Napoleon, but we don't know about Jean-Jacques Dessalines, the one who defeated Napoleon. How we know about Albert Einstein, but we don't know about Imhotep. And, I just went down the whole, gamut. We know about Shakespeare, we don't know about Ptahhotep, we know about so forth and so on, and just go down the whole thing. So if we're talking about decolonizing the academy, we know about Gandhi, but we don't know anything about Seti I or Ramesses II, who were really at the forefront of signing the very first peace treaties in the history of the entire planet Earth. So if we want to think about somebody who's about peace, you can either think about Gandhi, who supported every major war in his lifetime, or the African people who signed the very first peace treaties upon which every other peace treaty that's come after has been modeled upon directly or indirectly. So, that's just a little bit of a timeline. There are other things that went into it. But other things that I wanted to bring up is that the Indian government in 2017, 17th March, they offered to build a 200 million, 400 seat capacity parliament house for Ghana. And then they also presented $1 million check for renovation of Flagstaff House, or Jubilee House as it's called now, which is a presidential residence. And that was on the 15th of October 2017. So essentially what they're saying is, we bought your president, we're buying your parliament. There's nothing for you to say. We bought all your decision makers out.
Well,
that's the timeline.
Well, we can definitely see that. I mean, that's true, especially with the recent reaction from the government to promote, putting the statue back up in a more prominent location. We see that this movement has made waves throughout the continent that you mentioned. There were some brothers in Malawi who contacted you, who were also following this movement. Have there been any other brothers and sisters from any other countries that have also followed the movement in removing statues that may be in their country of Gandhi?
Yeah, matter of fact, I've gotten several emails and even done an interview with a Dalit reporter. So the Dalits are really, down with this, and other oppressed minorities who are under the yoke of this Indo-Aryan hegemony for centuries, where they always run the risk of being dismembered, castrated, burned alive, and things that you can't even imagine in these pogroms. And what these pogroms are, massive massacres going throughout the countryside, just killing everyone who's a Dalit, burning them alive, raping the women, ripping out their wombs, like all type of stuff. But really quick, you asked me, well, why would they put up the statue? I want to give you a quick quote to put it in context, and then we'll come back to the other contacts throughout the world. As a matter of fact, in Atlanta, there are people who are talking about ripping down the statue of Gandhi there, because this is the thing. Once you know better, you should do better, right?
That's right.
But I want to give you this quote, and I'm sure all of you will recognize this quote. And it says, if you can control a man's thinking, you do not have to worry about his action. When you determine what a man shall think, you do not have to concern yourself about what he will do. If you make a man feel that he is inferior, you do not have to compel him to accept an inferior status, for he will seek it himself. If you make a man think that he is justly an outcast, you do not have to order him to the back door. He will go without being told. And if there is no back door, his very nature will demand one. And can you tell me who wrote that?
Is that Frederick Douglass?
Carter G. Woodson.
Carter G. Woodson. Yeah.
The second answer is correct. Nana Carter G. Woodson. I'm saying Nana out of respect. That's a term for an ancestor. So yes, that's Nana Carter G. Woodson, Miseducation of the Negro. And that really goes to the core of why they would do this. Because, like Dr. Runoko Rashid says, he says, what you do for yourself depends on what you know of yourself. What you know of yourself depends on what you think of yourself. And what you think of yourself depends on what you have been told. That's to say about yourself. So if you follow that, whole chain of action, then if you're not told very much about yourself, then how can you think very much how can you know very much about yourself? If you don't know very much about yourself, how can you think very much of yourself? And if you don't think very much of yourself, then how can you act in ways that are consistent with that self-esteem? And what we really see is essentially the same thing that was shown in the Clark-Doll test of 1939, where, the Clark-Doll experiment by Dr. Kenneth Clark and Mamie Clark, they asked black children to choose between a black doll and a white doll. And the dolls were the same, but they always thought the white doll was nicer. If you look in Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization, he has an image there with a caption that says, "What's wrong with this picture?" And it's an image from Simotap, and it shows a child looking in the mirror with a towel around his neck like a cape, and he's looking at a white Superman figure, right? Now, what happens to children who are always given heroes that don't look like them? Well, what we're experiencing in Africa is exactly what happens, which is, all the things that we complain about. This person is corrupt, this person is this person is that. That is the calculated and intentional end result of a process to make that the end result, to manufacture anti-Africans, to manufacture those who are against the black race.
Hashay, Hashay. I actually have a cousin who's still living who was a part of that dog test that you mentioned, and then he actually chose the black dog.
You must have something different in your family, so give yourself a round of applause for whatever y'all are doing.
Well,
So real quick on the term Asher. So when I said that all of these things have been calculated intentionally to bring about, the destruction and all these things that we complain about, to that your response was Asher. You shouldn't say Asher to that. Share, the root verb of that is share to happen. When you say Asher, you are asking for the power in order to make what I just described actually happen in real life, which is the continued perpetuation of the subjugation of black people. So Asher is only said when someone has said something that you want to occur and to happen in the world, not when we're lamenting something that is egregious to the black race. So if you want to say something like, oh, what you said is true, you could say, Utoni, Utoni, that's a new term maybe, but Utoni is to say it's true. And the root verb of that is ta, which is to point. It's also the verb for to be straight. So Uta is that which is straight. And by analogy, that which is true is that which is straight, not twisted and bent. So you could try to use that, but I really want to discourage you from saying share when we're talking about the rape, pillage, and plunder of black people. We don't want that to happen continuously.
I appreciate that lesson, and I'm pretty sure our listeners will also take that knowledge. I appreciate that, brother.
No problem. That's what I'm here for. And I also teach Yoruba classes so that we can do that. And I had a series online where I was going into some of these words that a lot of people are exposed to, but may not know the language or have the full background in terms of the usage of it. Because people who come to Yoruba class, they're using it just like that. But as we get deeper into it, we have to be more precise in the things that we do, think, and say.
Let me ask you a question, Dr. Kambon. In terms of how did this image of Gandhi as this nonviolent leader come about when in fact this was a guy that supported violence throughout, almost his whole career. So how was that coup pulled off to have him projected as this person, this advocate of nonviolence?
Very good. So the main thing is what I term impropaganda, and that's a spinoff of what G.B. Singh and Tim Watson use in Gandhi under cross-examination. They call it propaganda in place of propaganda. The reason why I say improper Gandhi because it's improper propaganda about Gandhi, so we don't want the term proper to even be associated with that, just a play on words. But as I mentioned before, Gandhi was a pathological liar. So he was a progenitor of improper Gandhi. So if you read his autobiography, for example, he says, and I mentioned this a little bit earlier, he says that his heart was with the Zulus. He bore no grudge against the Zulus. How he was happy to hear that his ambulance corps would only nurse wounded Zulus. All of those are lies. All of those are lies. Every single thing, everything I just mentioned to you is an outright lie. Now, the only way that you know it's a lie is if you read what he was writing at the time, where he's talking about he wanted to get military training, where he's talking about he wants firearms in order to take his share in the defense of the colony, where he's talking about the ambulance corps shouldn't last for any more than a couple of days, and how that's all just a scheme to get military training, right? And how later on in 1918, you can read where he is talking about home rule without military power is useless, and that the young Indians should think well and get registered and enroll in the war, World War I that I'm talking about. So if people haven't read anything other than his biography, you just have to take what he's saying on face value, right? And the ones who he duped, they didn't have any access to his collected works. and a lot of his collected works are in Gujarati. And does Martin Luther King read Gujarati? No. Does Mandela read Hindi? No. So one, those aren't even compiled until 1998, 99, thereabout. And then once they're compiled, the only way to get access to it at that time is you go to a library that may happen to have all 99 volumes in the series. Before more recent times, it's been made available online as a searchable PDF. So essentially, if you don't have access to the searchable PDFs, there's no way that you will be able to catch Gandhi in his intentional and calculated outright lie. And why I say outright lie is because he said, for example, I only nursed wounded Zulus. You can read what he wrote at the time, Trooper Forder, who is some, British, whatever. He's talking about actually nursing all these white folks. So, it's very clear, but you can't see that it's clear in terms of the lie he's telling unless you have access to his original writings. And Gandhi himself, in 1927, thereabout, there's no way that he can think that he will ever be caught in this lie and that there will ever be technology that will be able to compile all his personal letters, right? His personal correspondences, his notes, you understand, his columns in Gujarati, and then have it translated into English, and then for someone to be able to search through the entire thing for the word kafir, right? That's beyond any type of comprehension of, can I get caught in this lie? For him, absolutely not, right? But for us, all you have to, if you want to see Gandhi, just go through volumes about, and you want to talk about post-epiphany, go through volumes about 8 up until 13 thereabout, and just do a search for the word kafir, right? Then you could get all these things. And again, he played no small role. And even you can look as early as 1909, where he was approached by Reverend Doak, who asked him, is he ready to be a martyr? And that's where they came up with this whole train incident story, which is a good 16 years after it was supposed to have happened. Now, Gandhi wrote on everything. If someone is accosted in the Indian community, he writes about it. If this person was, called this, he writes about it. But you're telling me that this magical train incident, he didn't even have an occasion to write about it until 16 years after it happened, and only after Reverend Doak came to him and asked him, is he ready to be a martyr? And that's essentially where they cook up this, this BS story of the train incident. And the way that it's a lot more than anything else, even more than the time, is that no version of it corresponds with another version. He published on it 4 times from that first one in 1909. In one version, he goes into the room and it's so dark he can't see anything. And another one, the light is shining and there's a white man in it and he's scared of that person. And one, he's the only one in the room. And the next one, the white guy is beside him and he doesn't, So it's like every version is like, I'm just coming up with something to get more sympathy. So let me add that to the story now. And this is what children do when they lie and how you catch them in the lie because, they don't realize that they have to at least be consistent with the lie that they told. And that's how you catch people up. So Gandhi wasn't even consistent in that lie. So Gandhi, pathological liar. And again, if you don't know that, that's how he comes to this idea of, he's peaceful. Meanwhile, he has a role in every single major war in his entire lifetime, from the Boer War to the Bambata Rebellion, to World War I, to World War II, writing to Roosevelt about this is how to win the war, writing to Hitler, calling him, my friend, addressing him as my friend. So in every, for advocating the Indians to sign up and to give assistance to those in the those whites who are fighting against the Kafir rebels, that every single thing that he's doing is, very violent. These are very violent things. However, because he's giving you this lie that I took this vow in 1906, if you don't know that that's a lie, then you just have to take it at face value. And how many people have the time to just research into some of these things?
So basically, Martin Luther King was conned because the information wasn't available. Let me ask you this in terms of...
And real quick, there are as I mentioned, there are 2 possibilities. One, you have to be vastly ignorant of the primary sources on Gandhi, or you have to be against black people. And I think Martin Luther King was vastly ignorant about who Gandhi was. And Dr. John Henrik Clarke said this in A Great and Mighty Walk. And that's where I first came across this information about Gandhi, where he just said if Martin Luther King knew who Gandhi was, he would have chosen, and he mentioned that in a couple of lectures. He said he would have chosen somebody like Akhenaten or Shambhala, another ruler. He said he would have chosen a black person who was about peace and not Gandhi, who was a faker and a fraud. And he like mentioned a couple more very colorful adjectives. And again, his analysis is the same as mine, that Martin Luther King just had no idea, because how could he? He was assassinated in what, 68? How is he going to have access to his writings in Hindi and read it and say, oh, Gandhi was lying? He doesn't have that luxury.
Right, right. Okay, in terms of this Indian money that is being used for some type of infrastructure, and of course we see all over the continent, with the Chinese, and the Arabs, others, we see money being poured into Africa, and these neo-colonial leaders accepting the money. The Chinese built the African Union headquarters, for example. From your perspective there on the continent, where are we in terms of a mass movement against neocolonialism? Because, in my opinion, if that doesn't occur, then nothing really changes in Africa.
Right. Yes, I've spoken on this before, just in terms of the proxy war between India and China for Africa. Everyone understands that whosoever controls Africa controls the world. And unfortunately, it's not the indigenous black people who are controlling Africa. I was just looking at a list of the supposedly 20 most richest people in Africa, and only 5, maybe 5 and a quarter are black. So in all of Africa, the vast majority of the billionaires in Africa are not black people. They're either these Dutch Boers or British or Arabs or whatever, but they're not black. So that should tell you something very clearly. So if we're talking about this neo-colonialism, that we have to understand, one, that all Eurasians and their descendants are our enemies, and we can really see this in terms of the heroes that they select versus the ones that we select. And just in shorthand, their heroes are our enemies, and our heroes are their enemies. So if they are lauding someone like Spit on the Ground Cecil Rhodes as a hero, and they have a Rhodes Scholarship and so forth, that lets you know, oh, that's the hero, that must be my enemy. If you don't know anything else, if you haven't read a book, that should tell you that must be an enemy of mine. If they're telling you look up to Gandhi, you just have to know, all right, that must be an enemy. I don't know why. I may not have read anything yet, but let me just be on the safe side and say that's an enemy. Now, if we look at our side and we're looking at someone like Didan Kimati, I should say Nana Didan Kimati, Nana, again, a term of respect, then who they're saying that was a terrorist, then we'll say that's one of our utmost grandcestors, as my father says. If they talk about a Nat Turner, and then we don't have a day celebrating the life of Nat Turner, but we have one celebrating Martin Luther King, that should tell us something. Okay, maybe we need to be looking more at the Nat Turner side of stuff. You understand?
That's right.
So all of those types of things. So that's one. But more directly to your point, everyone is rushing to get a foothold in Africa, and they're doing it by projecting soft power. So the soft power projection is, one, Gandhi the hypocrite, which is perfectly incarnate in India the hypocrite. So India is using the so-called face of nonviolence, Gandhi. Meanwhile, since 2014, which is since Narendra Modi, the prime minister, has been in power, they've been the #1 importer of arms on the entire planet Earth. What does that tell you? Let's give you a face of nonviolence, a facade of nonviolence, while we're planning on being the most violent nation on the entire planet Earth, imported more weapons than everybody on the entire planet Earth, while they're giving you Gandhi statues. And that was actually, the government of India actually commissioned these statues to be put up all throughout the world as they get these footholds in Africa and elsewhere. So what they were trying to do in Malawi was another instance of that. They're trying to have these Mahatma Gandhi convention centers. They have Mahatma Gandhi, scholarships, all these types of things. So what they're doing is they're giving you the soft power image. Meanwhile, they're planning on coming with hard power, backed up with their nuclear weapons and backed up with them being the #1 importer of arms in the entire world. That's one. If you look at China, again, everyone knows that whosoever controls Africa controls the world. So China is here with Confucius Institutes, and that's their face of soft power. Korea is coming in. Matter of fact, they had a conference where they're coming in using martial arts, Taekwondo, and they're using that as their soft power. If you look at the U.S. trying to set up a military base here in Ghana, if you look at Macron trying to set up Ghana as part of Francophonie, if you look at Israel trying to get Ghana to assist them to be part of the AU, if you look at Morocco applying and joining the AU, even though there they call indigenous black people Abid, which is quote unquote slaves. So all of these things tell you that someone is very clear on where they need to be. Meanwhile, our children, because they don't know anything about these matters of geopolitics or what have you, they're rushing headlong towards destruction, going across the Sahara Desert, spending thousands of dollars to go across the Mediterranean so that they can go be a footstool in Shushan for some pale white Eurasian, Neanderthal. So that's really the face of what we're dealing with here.
So in terms of on the ground, we know that our struggle is protracted, and it takes a long time to create to develop a critical mass to bring about the type of changes that we need to liberate and empower African people. But do you see any types of movements there? Even small organizations or whatever, where for example, I see some young Africans now, hailing the significance of Thomas Sankara. What are you seeing there in terms of the young people who really will be the engines for change in terms of organizing against neo-colonialism, the same way Nkrumah, Sekou Touré, and others organized against colonialism?
Right. So the youth, by and large, don't really understand the issues. They just have kind of like a misty view of, oh, these are just quote unquote positive people, or here are just famous continental Africans, and then they just start going along. Oh yeah, Nkrumah. Oh yeah, Sankara. Oh yeah, Touré. And they just have a sense like, okay, here are some famous black people. They must have been positive. Let me just follow along. And when I say they don't really understand the issues, like for example, if you look at the shift from and I gave a talk on this at the AAPC conference that just passed earlier this month, that if you look at this All African Peoples Conference that Kwame Nkrumah put together, right, is really a shift from Pan-Africanism to what he's calling All-Africanism, right, which is why they call it the All African Peoples Conference. Now, what's the substance of that? Pan-Africanism, so initially you had Henry Sylvester Williams, who had the African Association, and then they changed it to the Pan-African Association because they wanted everyone to be clear that they're not only talking about continental Africans, because he himself was out of Trinidad and Tobago. So if you call it the African Association, then people are going to ask you, well, what are you doing? You're not African. You're not from Africa. So he's using the term Pan-African, so I'm not just talking about continental Africans. I mean black people regardless of location, right? That's that. Now, that was the case all the way up until about 1945, the 5th Pan-African Congress, where, Nkrumah, Padmore, Du Bois, and others really shifted from black people regardless of location to location regardless to whether or not you're black. You see this in who Kwame Nkrumah married, Fatia Nkrumah, this Arab, invader, right? So supposedly Coptic, but we know that, Kemet meant land of black people, and we had all these invasions from the Hyksos to the Persians to the Greeks to the Romans to the Mamluks. We can just keep going down the list all the way to the Arabs who are still there. So we have all these invasions. So if you are in the land of black people, that's Kemet, and you are not black, that lets you know that these are invaders who went through the worm glaciation, who went through a mutation in a specific gene called SLC24A5, which makes them pale white Eurasians. and they've just come back as recent invaders to Africa. So what you really see in that AAPC is a shift away from Pan-Africanism, but the youth are not reading any of those texts to be able to really disambiguate, like, is that something that we should laud, a shift away from black people regardless of location to location regardless of whether or not you're black? And the talk that I gave was lamenting this whole situation where Haiti applied to join the African Union and they're kept out. But meanwhile, Morocco applies to join and they're kept out with the disclaimer of saying, oh, you're one of us, but you're not African enough. Meanwhile, the people who invented the term Pan-Africanism mentioned Haiti by name, right? You can see it on the flyer that was distributed for that conference in 1900. They mentioned Haiti, spelled Hayti, which is, whatever. But then you have this shift to just location. If you happen, and that's what we call continentalism, this fraud Pan-Africanism, which is if you happen to be on the African continent, whether or not you're an Arab invader or not, you're down. So then Morocco applies to join, and then they're welcome with open arms. What is this really telling us? This is really the legacy of Kwame Nkrumah of selling out black people in favor of Arabs, right? This overture, I'm going to marry this woman, this Arab woman, sight unseen, to ship her to me. I'll marry her. All right, let's just get down with the Arabs. And what a lot of these Arab apologists do, these quislings amongst us, is that, oh, well, Gaddafi bankrolled this and bankrolled that. This lets you know that they're either prostitutions or pimpstaticians. So prostitutes mixed with politician, and maybe more of the former than the latter, or pimpstaticians in the sense that they are pimping Mama Africa and having her go on that stroll in exchange for, whatever cash that Gaddafi or whoever else is going to put up to us. So we have to be very clear. And a lot of these folks consider themselves to be Marxists or communists or socialists or you name it. And what that's all about is, oh, we're dealing with a class struggle. We're not dealing with race. Meanwhile, we were enslaved on the basis of race, of their race and ours, that we were colonized on the basis of race, that we are continually subjected to, all the stuff that we complain about day in and day out on the basis of race. But guess what? We can't fight back on that basis, right? And it's like the analogy I give is, let's picture somebody punches you in the jaw, but you're saying, oh, I can't hit you back with my right hand because that would be jawist, right? That would be jawism in reverse. So let the jaw fight for itself. I'll just attack if you attack my right hand. That would be insane. That would be stupid not to realize that we're all part of one black body. But that's what they tell us, that the jaw is the lower class. So the lower class is doing its thing. And then the right hand is the middle class. And then this one is the left hand is the bourgeoisie. Then the leg is a lumpen proletariat. So we're supposed to fight it out on the basis of class where only my left leg can kick back. That's so stupid that even if you saw somebody do that, you would say that person deserved to get his butt whooped. But that's the situation that we're in, as opposed to uniting on the basis of we're all black people and our common enemies are all these pale white Eurasians. And they've been our enemies for over 5,000 years, as Dr. Chancellor Williams pointed out to us, and as is shown in the primary text.
Well, Dr. Kambon, I even struggle with even the usage of the term Pan-Africanism. I understand the connotation behind it meaning all Africans on the diaspora and on the continent, but just its association with the Greek god Pan and what that represented.
But so first off, that's a folk etymology, and it's not a correct etymology. That the original word in Greek is pas, which is all, and the neuter form of pas, which is all, is pan. So it's just another form of that same word. So it has absolutely nothing to do with the god called Pan. So just look that up. Just do a quick search for etymology of the prefix Pan. So, but that's not to discount the point that if we're dealing with Greek terms whatsoever, that's problematic. So we need to look at something like using a term like Kemetiu, which has an association with Kemet, the land of black people, and then Kemetiu is black people itself. So we could use that term not to mean, ancient Kemet, but any black people, we could use a term like that, which is wholly, from black people. And it also links to our ancient historical past. And there's no need to evoke any false etymologies about it. We can just deal with things on the basis of what primary sources say. So I just wanted to correct that, and then I also want you to do your own research to verify that. But you see certain things, and I don't know where you got that, but you see things like floating around the internet on memes and on other things. But as a linguist myself, or I should rather say an African who studies linguistics, because that's my primary. I deal with Africa equals black and black equals Africa. What I would prefer for us to do is go away from any terms in English or Greek or Roman, Latin, whatever, and use terms like Kemetiu, black people, or Abibifo, which is a term that translates to African, which also means black people, or Awadulawa, which is a Yoruba term for African people, which just means what? Black people, or Farafina, which is a land of black people, or Farafin, which is black people, or Nitkunyo and Wolof, which is black people, or Bandombe, which is the word for Africans in Kikongo, which means, guess what? Black people. So if we deal with this, then we can see that we're beyond just continental Africans to black people, regardless of location, whether they be in the Pacific Islands, where you'll see some of the blackest people you'll ever meet, whether we're talking about in Haiti or Trinidad or Jamaica, whether we're talking about on the continent. And then once we understand Kemet means land of black people, then we're not talking about necessarily restricting it to ancient Kemet. That means that all of the lands of black people that are currently occupied by non-black people, I'm talking about North Africa, that those are lands that have to be reconquered for black people.
Yes, I do understand that, and I have done that research. Is exactly what you stated. I gave a talk in a lecture called "Black Greeks, White Masters," and it goes into the association of it with being a Greek term. So it does go into that folk etymology, but also, like you stated, us moving away from all of the Greek terms and using African terms to describe ourselves, I think is the correct path for us.
Yeah, we need Brother Amos, if you can send Dr. Kambon an email. I'd like to get all of those African terms for black people and post them on African Liberation Media. So if you could send him an email so that he can respond to you and give us all those terms.
Almost definitely.
So I actually did a talk that's available for purchase on a BB Tumi called The Ancient African Origins of Pan-Africanism, and I'm writing a book by the same title. That's my working title. And it gives a textual analysis for all of these texts from ancient Kemet, where they're talking about bringing together black people to fight off these pale white Eurasian invaders. All these texts after text after text after text that are saying this, that they're coming together on the basis of we're all black people, right? So you can purchase that. It's the video plus all the slides. And in the slides, it goes into all these different terms in Bambara language, in Chi, in Yoruba, in Wolof, in Kikongo, and all these various languages in Songhai, in Medu-Neter, of how we called ourselves black people, dating way back to the pyramid text over 4,000 years ago. So this is a false premises that these Marxists and socialists are saying, oh, we just called ourselves black people as a response to enslavement and blah, blah, so we shouldn't call ourselves black people and blah, blah, blah. That's a false premise, because we were calling ourselves black people before there was anything called Greek, Greece, or Rome, or America for that matter, of course, or France or in England. That, again, over 4,000 years ago in the pyramid text of Nesubiti, Pepi Menre, it talks about you stand as the Apis bull at the forefront of the black people. So what does this tell us? This tells us that the concept of black people goes older than all of these things that are, again, false premises. So if you think that, oh, that's just a modern term, therefore, if we're going to get out of this, we have to stop using the term black people. If you start with false premises, it's going to take you to false conclusions. Now, the other thing about the state of the youth here that we were talking about just a little bit earlier is that, and I was just sending an email to a sister here who she's actually based in the U.S., and she was talking about how the continental Africans don't know very much about their history. This Wolof brother didn't even know that the terms for the days of the week in Wolof are derived from Arabic, and he was just dumbfounded and astounded. And even when she showed him, he was like, wow, I can't believe that, whatever. So, what I tend to find is that those who know better, quote unquote, they're all in the diaspora. They're all in what I prefer to call Crackerville, right? And they sit there in Crackerville with binoculars to to say, oh, is Africa perfect yet? Is it perfect yet? Oh, no. Okay, well, let me just stay here financing my enemy, the one who is destroying Africa, to make sure it's not perfect. I'm going to keep working for them by paying my mortgage, by paying my taxes, by paying my car note, by drinking water, by eating food. I'm going to keep financing this enemy. And then every so often, I'm going to pick up some binoculars and then say, oh, the people there don't know any better. And then I'm going to stay right where I am. And I'm like, that's fundamentally problematic. What I've seen from me being here on the ground is you got to be in it to win it. If you want people to have a different level of consciousness and a different mindset, then those who supposedly know better need to be here and share information. Not only that you're dumping stuff into an empty slate, but you'll be learning at the same time about how to build your own house from what's on your land, how to grow crops from what's around you, as opposed to all these so-called conscious people. When they get sick, they go into the hospital where everybody else goes. When there's time to deliver a baby, most of them are doing what? They're going to the hospital where everyone else goes. When they get hungry, most of them are going to Whole Foods. When they need something to wear, they go into the mall. You understand?
That's right.
And they're getting their shoes at the same place. So if we can bring those two together, the practical skills that are still here, and then that level of consciousness and understanding of the enemy that's over there, if we can bring those in the same place, because most of the quote-unquote conscious continental Africans who I know and have been through our history, they went outside, they got their heads cracked in, and then they realized, oh, this little teeny tiny fragment that I was calling myself, that don't mean nothing, right? I call myself Asante, and I was beefing with Fantes, but when I went over there and the police officer hit me upside the head, he didn't ask for my Asante passport. He didn't ask for my Ghanaian passport. He don't even know what a Ghana is, right?
That's right.
So if we're being attacked on the basis of we're all black, then to fight back, we need to also fight back on the basis of, guess what, we're all black. That's so, right. You know, nothing's going to change here. And again, whosoever controls Africa controls the world. And unfortunately, it's not black people who control Africa. It's everybody else who's coming in here. Meanwhile, the people who got all this consciousness and read 1,000 books are still over there financing our enemies. So what we need to do is divest from America and invest in Africa to make Africa great again.
That's right. That's right. We definitely appreciate you for joining us, Dr. Kambon, and we're out of time. But if you could briefly just talk a little bit about Bibi Tumi, the social network, African-owned social network that you have, and anything else that you want our listeners to know.
Okay. So Bibi Tumi translates to Black Power in Chi. And what I'd like for those of you who are on the call is to navigate while you're on the call right now. All right, you got internet access, I know, because we're on Skype. But I'd like for you to go there and, sign up. So you can log in, you can register. And then also we have the apps. So both the independent standalone app and then the chat app, which is its own thing. And what it allows you to do is to interact with black people who don't want to be on white platforms. That's one. And who have quit the white platforms. So for me, I quit Facebook back in 2011, quit WhatsApp about 2 years ago, never been on Instagram or Snapchat or whatever. So all these different, what else? Twitter, not on there. So all these different white platforms, what happens is that the cave beast is like, look, we are going to be the intermediary. So before you can talk to anybody else who looks like you, we're going to be the intermediary. Now, what Nana Marcus Garvey could have done is done the same thing. Just say, look, New York Times got $1 million budget. Let's just use the New York Times. And then if they don't like what I'm saying, they'll put me in New York Times jail, the equivalent of Facebook jail, where they're not letting me post anymore, right? But what he decided is he looked around for his men of big affairs. He said he ain't see none, so he had to create them himself. So that's the exact same position that we're in right now. So we can talk for days about how integration destroyed us and destroyed the Negro Leagues and the cottage industries that were all around it. But as we're talking with our erudite analysis, we're sitting on Facebook to do it. So we have to create our own, and we've already created our own, and that's Bibi Tumi. So you can interact with black people on the basis of we're all black people. And if you share the same ideals, convictions, beliefs, then that's where we start to build what it is that we want to see. An intercontinental nation based on the fact that we're all black people, not only talking about continental Africans, Not talking about the Africans and the so-called diaspora know so much better and they're so conscious. None of that. We're all black people and we have common ancestry, we have common descent. And if we want to survive into the next 100 years and the next 1,000 years, we need to come together on the basis of that, rather than making some cave beast named Mark Zuckerberg rich as we chilling on Facebook. And then he decides, oh, you said something that's too black. Guess what? You in Facebook jail. And he's the same one who owns WhatsApp and Instagram and all these other Neanderthal networks. So I would highly encourage you to quit all those networks today. Can I get a pledge of y'all to quit those white networks today?
Yeah, in fact, I sent my application in the other day.
Good. So I'm talking about two things, not only just using the black network exclusively, but also quitting the white networks. That's what we need to do, in my humble opinion. So I'll give you some time to ruminate and think about that, because everyone has 1,000 reasons for why they need to keep using white people's stuff. But, you know, where we have a different alternative, whether that's being clothes, whether that be in internet, we got to get off the digital plantation. So Nana Harriet Tubman, she ain't chill out on the plantation. She was getting people up out of there. So by the same token, I'm sitting here and I'm getting my Nana Harriet Tubman on and saying, yo, let's stop chilling on the plantation. Let's get off the plantation. And that's what Abibi Toomey represents, getting off the digital plantation and working in this African, which equals Black Quilombo.
What's your opinion of YouTube? Is that still a tool that we should be using to get information out?
No. So what I decided to do is to create a bbtoomey.tv. So we already have the soft launch of it, and that's already up there. And what I decided is about 2 years ago is that I'm not interacting with anyone on any white KB's network. So if you notice, I haven't posted anything on YouTube in a good 2 years. So people are saying, oh, Dr. Kambon, can you do this? Oh, Dr. Kambon, can you? No, I'm not interacting with you. And at the beginning of any video, I say, I will never respond to anything that you post here. If you want to interact with me, then you need to interact with me on a BB to me. So that's step one. Step two is cutting off the YouTube altogether, right? And once a bbtoomey.tv is fully functional, when we get the app up, then that's going to be the move, is to get rid of YouTube. Because again, it's not that this one Cave Beast network is good and the other one is bad. We have to create all of our own things and get off of the Cave Beast one. So again, if you send me a message on YouTube, oh, I'm dying, help me, you're not going to get a response, because I made a decision based on principle that I'm not interacting with any black people on any white social network, period. So if you want to interact with me, then you know where to interact with me. It's called a BB Toomey. If you don't want to interact with me, matter of fact, there's a brother who used to be on a BB Toomey, then he started posting. He was actually an admin, then he went through some changes, whatever. So he kept posting on the YouTube, and I sent him an email. I was like, please stop posting on YouTube. If you want to interact with me, interact on a BB Toomey. He just kept posting on YouTube, oh, this is a great talk, oh, this is a great lecture. I blocked that brother. I blocked him. I'm like, no, if you are just so hard-headed that you like, I'm not going to use the black one, I'm going to use the white one, then we don't need to interact at all on any basis. There's nothing for us to talk about. If we can't even get that common ground, that common foundation together, then there's nothing that we're going to be talking about that's going to be of substance.
Yeah, that should be the easy part. But yeah, I do have a profile, and I have downloaded the app on my phone.
And this tells us the state of our race right now, right? So the people who are talking about we want to have, so power is about responsibility, right? So if you have power over a nation, this means you have responsibility to feed all the people there, take care of all their health care, take care of their defense. That's what power is about. It's about responsibility. So these people who are saying, oh, they want black power, whatever, they're not even willing to click a button. If they have to choose between the Facebook or a BB Toomey, they're clicking that. They're telling you they can't even get to that stage. And these are the people who I'm supposed to work with to build a nation, an intercontinental black nation, and they can't even get off of this thing? Nah, man, we in some bad shape, man.
Right. Well, I created a e-commerce platform called Kmarket, the black marketplace, and it's the same situation in trying to pull people away from the Amazon and the eBay. and all of the other white e-commerce platforms.
Yeah, we have a bbtumi.store on the same tip. And this is why I say a bbtumi is more like a dentistry than anything else. Why do I say that? I'm a dentist because trying to get black people to do black things, especially ones who said they're about black things, is like pulling teeth.
Like pulling teeth, yeah.
So this is the root canal right here.
All right, brother. Well, we definitely, once again, we're out of time, but we definitely appreciate you for joining us, and we'll definitely have to have you back again, because I also want to get your opinion. I know we don't have time to talk about it today, but I also want to get your opinion on the scholarship released by Asari Motep on his translation of Kemet.
I'll only discuss the works of scholars, so I will not comment on anything dealing with Asari Motep. My understanding is that he plays a linguist on the internet, but I'm not going to address anything from him whatsoever. If you have, if you're looking for a commentary on the work of any scholar, I'll discuss that, but I will not address anything with him.
Okay, all right, brother. Well,
but there's a brother named Netter Neb who thoroughly crushes and destroys that brother's fraud scholarship. So look up the work of Netter Neb. Yeah, so if you want a good perspective on it, that brother is going hard against all fraud scholarship from someone who pretends to be a linguist but is not a linguist whatsoever and understands absolutely zero concepts of even basic linguistics that you would learn on the first day of any linguistics class. So look up Netter Neb, and he's been in this ongoing debate with that brother. So yeah, look that up.
Okay, all right, Dr. Kambon again, Asante Sana, Madasi, and Bibatumi and Bibahodie.
Power or the lack of power. I want to repeat this. Power or the lack of power. If your education in this institution is not about gaining real power, not jobs, because your jobs do not represent power. Not getting elected, that does not represent power either. Buying your houses and fine clothes does not represent power. If it is not about real power, you are being miseducated and misled, and you will die educated and misled. If your study of black history is merely an exercise in feeling good about yourself, then you will die feeling good. The study of history then must be more than the pumping up of your self-esteem and the pumping up of your pride. Those things are important, but ultimately, those things are not the means by which we will save ourselves as people in this world.